Our scripture for this evening is Psalm chapter 1, verse 2. We'll supplement that with Psalm 63, verses 5 and 6. Psalm chapter 1, verse 2, Psalm 63, verses 5 and 6. Have you ever left church, perhaps had a spirit-filled experience, and you said something like, "The preacher sure preached today"? Or I've been in the Bible class and whoever was teaching the class said, "Wow, they really taught a great class." Maybe it's not in the church, maybe it's in school. You heard an intellectually stimulating lesson. In so many different arenas of life, we get so much information. But have you ever found yourself leaving those events and thinking as much as you enjoyed it, you can't remember half of what was said? Sometimes I want to mess with members. When they say, "Brother Gibbs, you sure preached today," I want to say, "What did I say?" One of the things we have to recognize is how our brains work. That's why God in His Word created a word that is so impactful and powerful to our understanding. In Psalm verse 2 of chapter 1, the second verse of Psalm chapter 1, there's a word there that says to meditate. In Psalm 63 in verses 5 and 6, we see again in verse 6 in particular the idea to meditate. Let's explore briefly what it means to meditate. The word meditate that we see in Psalm 1 and 2 and verse 6 in Psalm chapter 63 as well is the word meditate. In the Hebrew, it is a word that means to murmur. It means to utter in a low voice, to repeat to oneself, to constantly repeat, repetition, to utter in a low voice, to repeat to oneself, constant repetition. The reason we need to understand this is because this helps us to understand how to remember information. Let me give you 4 things quickly that will help you to learn and retain information. One is obviously the idea of meditating. If you take a principle, if you take a scripture, if you take a thought that is shared, and in a low voice to yourself, you repeat it, you utter it, you are speaking this to yourself in a repetitious way, it helps to reinforce in your psyche the information that you are repeating. So when the Bible teaches us to meditate, the Bible is teaching us how to actually remember information. A second way that we learn is through the process of taking notes. Now, when we take notes, we want to emphasize writing notes as opposed to taking notes on tablets and computers and things of that nature. Though it is important to take notes of any kind, research at both Princeton and UCLA, among other sources, have demonstrated that people remember more that they write than they type. So it's important to always take notes. I say this because when we have venues such as this, people say, "Brother Gibbs, I want to remember that, or I want to apply this to my life." A great way to do it is to meditate on it. That is to repeat it in a low voice to yourself. A second great way is to take written notes. And here's the third way. Discuss this with someone and discuss it immediately. Here's the value of taking notes and the value of discussing this with another person immediately. We have what is called a forgetting curve. Here's how you make it work to your favor. Again, studies show that if you take notes, if you go over your notes, or if you have a discussion with someone within a few hours of receiving information, you will remember 50 to 75% of the information that was shared. If you wait more than 24 hours before reviewing your notes or having a discussion with someone, you will only retain about 20% of the information. So reviewing your notes and having a discussion with someone can be very impactful in retaining information. The last thought is to tie a specific behavior to a principle. For example, you know that you have a problem with cursing, and you hear a lesson on not using the tongue in a bitter way or in a negative way. Change that by going out of your way to encourage someone. The very tongue that curses, when you retrain your mind that I am going to call someone each day and encourage them, it helps to reinforce the information because you're actually applying it and putting it into practice. Another example is that if you have bitterness in your heart, start making a journal of how good God has been and list your blessings. When you tie a specific behavior to a principle, you're more apt to remember that principle. And a last note that I want to add here is the idea to pitch your tent before you build your house. And what I mean by that is a tent that is pitched is meant to be temporary, where a house is meant to be more permanent. Before you start jumping all over the Bible, maybe you need to pitch your tent on a particular principle or particular thing that you need to study. So, for example, if you want to learn more about love, instead of talking about a whole lot of other things in the Bible, maybe you need to pitch your tent on love and stay there until you're ready to move on. By doing these things, it will help you to retain more information, and it will help you to apply these principles so that from Bible study and from sermons, you can become a better person. This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.